This is Curt Frantz reporting for Infowars at Infowars.com and Prison Planet at PrisonPlanet.com. On June 14th, Infowars' Alex Jones and Owen Shroyer interviewed the brilliant, insightful, witty Scott Adams. And I think Scott Adams made three errors during that interview. One was when Alex Jones asked him, with Trump doing all these great things, why didn't Obama do them? And Scott Adams' response was, well, there's a lot of parameters, but probably the most important one is that persuasion. Trump understands human nature, he understands persuasion, he sees possibilities, priorities, and he doesn't see limitations. Obama, on the other hand, is more fact-based and therefore has some limitations built in. Now, Scott Adams is right about President Trump, but he's wrong about President Obama, who was fact-challenged and delusional. It was Owen Shroyer who provided the correct answer to Alex's question.
I actually would have to disagree with Scott on this. I think that it's actually very simple why Trump was able to get this done and not Obama. I don't think you have to look for many reasons at all. I think it's one reason: he wanted to. But there's a fundamental difference between not just Obama, but Clinton and Bush and everyone prior to Trump. They didn't want to put America first. They didn't have America's interests first. They had their own special interests, their own agenda, all that.
Exactly. We know when Trump's doing something, he's doing it for our interest, but that tends to help other people as well.
Candidate Trump ran on an agenda of MAGA, and President Trump has been implementing that agenda in terms of economic prosperity and security and peace and freedom, protecting freedoms. All of these things flow out of the Founding Fathers' desires and plan for the federal government. That is, the three primary purposes are to protect the country from enemies, foreign and domestic, to protect the freedoms of the citizens, and to serve the citizens, to enable them to flourish, to dream big and realize their dreams. These things are blindingly obvious, yet they were neglected by prior presidents. They're not hard to do. They're not even hard to do if you want to, and if there's not a strong, powerful force trying to stop you from implementing them. Now, if it's the latter, then you'd see a lot of fighting. You didn't see a lot of fighting in the last 30 years before Trump. It was more play fighting than real fighting. Trump's real fighting, including fighting his own party, because he's trying to implement this agenda that a lot of powerful forces don't want implemented. So you can see that there is not an intent for a MAGA-type agenda from his predecessors. Now, Scott Adams' second error was in that he doesn't want to get inside the head of people.
I like to avoid saying that I know people's inner thoughts. So I usually avoid things like somebody who wants something unless they've said it in their own words.
If you don't understand thoughts and motivations of a person, you don't understand that person. And waiting for them to tell you what their thoughts and motivations are, well, you may never get that. So it's too much to surrender, to not try. People may not know what their thoughts and motivations are. They may not tell you them, or they may try to deceive you because they don't want you to know what their thoughts and motivation are, especially for people with a low sense of self. So the way to see what a person is, to understand a person, is to understand them the way they define themselves. The way they define themselves is how they think about themselves, how they feel about themselves, their sense of self. And everything that a person says, everything that a person does, reveals some portion of their sense of self. And all it takes is a desire to look into that and the awareness of how to look into that. Now, the third problem, the third error that Scott Adams made was when Alex Jones asked him. He was on vacation in Hawaii and had a bunch of people, multiple people, coming up to him and sort of aggressively attacking him, claiming things that weren't true. And when Alex Jones tried to settle things down and communicate, they just blew him off. They had nothing to do with him. So he asked Scott Adams, how do you deal with that? And Scott Adams correctly said, hey, you can't.
In my experience, you can't talk somebody out of that kind of frame. So if somebody's locked in, there's nothing you're going to say, even if you said everything right and logical and persuasive, they're pretty locked in. The only thing that's going to make a difference is results.
Well, these haven't been enough results so far. A person with a low sense of self doesn't experience cognitive dissonance. A person with a high sense of self, okay, especially if they're dealing with somebody who's a good ability to persuade, they can take in more data, they can modify the way they see the world through their inner world and adjust things, and they see that as an opportunity to grow. Person with a low sense of self, they're confined in here. They don't want to let other data in. They will pervert data that comes in and reinterpret data so it is consistent with what they have. So there is no cognitive dissonance. So if somebody says, oh, look at this great thing Trump did, as if he hasn't done enough already, well, it's either not a good thing, because in a good thing, a big thing, you can always find some negative aspect or project that one might happen in the future. Then you focus and blow that out of proportion, you minimize the good, and all of a sudden the bad outweighs the good, and it wasn't a good thing. Or you give someone else credit. Say, that wasn't really Trump that did it. It was these underlings, or it was Obama in the past. It's just taking hold now, and the good things are coming. Or the guy on the other side of the negotiating table wasn't Trump. Or the third thing is, it happened despite Trump. He happened to be there, and he's taking credit for it, doesn't really deserve it. So with those three things, a person in a low sense of self can hold onto that vision of the world, despite what reality is really doing, because they're disconnected from reality. Now, there was a fourth error it was an error of omission that Scott Adams made, and that is, it doesn't seem he appreciates the extent, the power, the breadth of the deep state, the ruling elites, the globalists, and how much they control the world, and the carrots and sticks that they use to largely control our federal government, people in our federal government, whether they're elected or unelected. You see some of this coming out in the IG's report. But Trump cannot be bought. He's a multi-billionaire. He can't be bullied. He can't be intimidated. Apparently can't be blackmailed. So he is free to do what he wants to do for the country, and it's very clear that he's committed and loves the country. So he's able to do what is obvious and not all that difficult to do if you intend to do it. His powers of persuasion enables him to get beyond the people who are trying to put up roadblocks in many cases. That's the great value, unique value that he brings to that role. And perhaps his greatest gift to this country and to humankind is this exposing of the deep state and its extent, and to do some of the rolling back of that. That's an enemy of humanity. With the goal of globalism in mind, they can't get there without taking down this country, and that is why you'll see a lot of politicians and predecessors to President Trump not acting in the country's best interest. This is Curt Frantz for Infowars at Infowars.com and Prison Planet at PrisonPlanet.com.